So as most of you know, Illinois is in the process of increasing broadband infrastructure capabilities and use in several projects throughout the state. And we're here to talk about the context and the progress of these projects. So I'm proud to introduce our panel of speakers who are working on leading and studying a number of these projects. Our first speaker will be Dionne Baux. She's the program officer for LISC Chicago, and she's working on the Smart Communities program. Next will be Jim Ciesla. Wave your hand so we know who you are. And he is faculty at Northern Illinois University and the independent evaluator for a sustainable broadband adoption project with Connected Living. Tracy Felty, next, is the director of the Saline County E911 and treasurer of the Counties of Southern Illinois 911 or CSI 911 project. Jean Loeb is a scholar whose research focuses on how IT is used for community-focused learning and development, so he'll offer this useful perspective. And finally, Matt Parks is the director of network services at NIU and the project director of the iFiber network deployment project there. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
Good morning, everyone. It's very hard being the first speaker because you can't learn from the previous speaker's mistakes. So you guys will be learning from me. Hello, I am Dionne Baux, and I'm a program officer with LISC Chicago. And we administer the Smart Communities program. How can I click it? Or I can't? Will you just?
I'll do that.
You'll just be my clicker. Thank you. Smart Communities Chicago is a high approach to broadband adoption. So as you see, there's a senior that is a part of our marketing campaign that Brian just clicked from. And she's telling us how does she stay up to date online. Smart Communities is a program that essentially works with residents, businesses, and youth in 5 communities across the city of Chicago. How does LISC do what we do? So all of our programming is built on our 10-year New Communities program. We have existing relationships that we work with the community and community stakeholders to develop what programs that a community would need for themselves. We as an intermediary never goes into a community to tell them, what do you need? We listen to the community stakeholders, not-for-profits in the communities to determine what are the needs and services of that community. We have existing relationships and programs that are already in our 5 smart communities. We're essentially working 16 communities across the city. But the 5 communities that we've chosen as the demonstration center are Humboldt Park, Englewood, Auburn Gresham, Hilton, and Chicago Lawn. The Smart Communities program is a result of a $7 million award from the U.S. Department of Commerce Broadband Technology Opportunities Program. LISC, in partnership with the City of Chicago, won this award, and LISC is the administrators of the program to the 5 smart communities that I just named. I want to just speak about a few of the successes of Smart Communities. We have about 6 different programs, but standout programs for us are 1, our Family Net Centers, which is integrated into LISC Centers for Working Family. As a part of our Centers for Working Family, this is a center that provides access to computers, access to financial training and literacy, access to jobs, as well as access to public benefits for residents that are a part of these communities participating in the Centers for Working Families. Since program inception, which was January of last year, 3,600 residents have participated in our digital literacy classes. As a part of our program, we also allow residents to earn a netbook. There are about 1,280 netbooks across all 5 smart communities that if individuals participate in 6 hours of classes, they can earn a netbook. We thought that the netbooks would be the driver to get individuals in the room and keep them coming to classes. However, what we're finding out is many individuals earn the netbooks and they continue to come back to find out, what more can I learn? I need more. How can I find jobs? How can I access public benefits? And through their netbook, now they're doing that by using their netbooks and coming back and serving as apprentices who are helping their fellow classmates learn skills that they previously learned. The feedback has been extremely positive, and we have many residents that are asking for more. The classes that we offer are very basic digital literacy classes. A couple of other programs that stand out is our Digital Youth Network program, where we work with after-school students through 5th through 8th grade. Over 200 students have participated in the classes. We have digital media programming in 5 of our elementary schools within the 5 smart communities. This year we've branched it out a bit, where we're not only working in elementary schools, but we're also working in community centers where students are able to access digital media tools. We also have a partnership with the Chicago Public Library and the U Media Labs, where we're feeding youth to U Media Labs throughout the smart communities. We have 3 new libraries that offer U Media, as well as the main branch at the Harold Washington Library downtown. We also have the Digital Youth Summer Jobs, where we've had over 117 students participate in a summer program where they were working with technology-related employers. They also learned digital skills. And at the end of the program, they were awarded MacBooks. So you have a picture of some of our students there that are participating in our open house. Those are youth from Humboldt Park that were interested in our kiosk. And then to the left, there is a field trip where we took our high school students to Argonne National Laboratories last summer. Another very successful program as a part of Smart Communities are our community portals. Now this was a big surprise for us, that it would take off so well. With the community portals, it's neighborhood-driven news. It's great directory resources for businesses who at one point were never online, as well as for not-for-profit organizations. There's a calendar of events where individuals can look at this community portal to find out what is going on in your community. Anyone can contribute. So the purpose of the community portals is for a neighborhood to actually express what does their neighborhood look like to them. So for example, if you Google Inglewood or you Google Humboldt Park now, you'll see the community portal instead of the last shooting or robbery that happened the previous night before. 40,000 visits to our quarter, just as of, to the portal as of quarter 1, 2012. On average, we have about 41 new contributors per quarter, and 61 news items are submitted on average per quarter. And that's it. Thank you. Anyone have questions? If you have questions about questions, or are we doing it at the end? Yeah.
I just ask one question. What does LISC stand for?
Local Initiative Support Corporation.
So I'm going to straddle the podium here a little bit so I can see the PowerPoints. My name is Ciesla from Northern Illinois University, and I'm the PI on an evaluation project of an SBIA-funded technology adoption program. I'll just give you some a rundown of how the program works very briefly, and then explain some of the findings we have so far. Okay, the project is the awardee of the funding was a private corporation in Massachusetts named called Connected Living. And the name of the project is Getting Illinois Low-Income Seniors and People with Disabilities Online. Connected Living is a social entrepreneurial model private for-profit corporation. And given the fact that this is a publicly funded program, built into the funding are dollars for an independent university-based evaluation. And that's my job. That's what I've been doing. So it's an SBA program. We're all familiar with the program. And there was, of course, some matching funds from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Connected Living has devised in the more profitable continuing care retirement center market what they consider to be an adoption program. I'm not here to do an infomercial for Connected Living. I think what the evaluation has allowed me to do is to reduce what they do to components that make sense for many different contexts. So I can sort of disaggregate their program, look at various sections and portions of it to see what works and what's the best to create behavior change and make people interested in using computers and incorporate computer use, internet use into daily life. The steps are to attract the users. I'll explain in just a second, but what we have done is implemented a program in 23 low-income and subsidized housing buildings across northern Illinois. It's a portfolio of buildings designed to represent the entire spectrum of publicly funded housing in the United States. Urban, high-rise, suburban, rural, all the way from Illinois, from Chicago to Moline. And I've been to the 23 buildings. They're quite diverse with respect to almost every other characteristic than income, eligibility for subsidized housing, and the fact that the people who live there are usually about 60 years or older. So that's the only factor that's not different. So the program Connected Living has done is they hire a community program manager to go into each building and implement the program. They attract users by creating awareness, having awareness-raising events, social networking, discussion groups that focus on computer use that are appropriate themes and topics that people live in the building. They assess computer needs by giving surveys and sitting down with people one at a time and asking them what they would like to do, what the computer would mean to them, and how they would like to use it. They train the users in a 12-week computer lab community training program that starts with how to click the mouse. And believe me, I've seen these programs, somebody's hand on a mouse and a CPM's hand on their hand, moving the mouse around, starting at that level, turning the computer on, all the way through attaching emails, which, putting an attachment on an email turns out to be quite a complicated task. And I've seen all of this, and I've seen people who have very low literacy skills, who do all they can personally to prevent people from knowing they have low literacy skills, learn how to use computers. You realize going right to YouTube is an excellent thing for people who don't read well. There's a lot of content on the internet that doesn't involve reading. So it's been a very exciting program I'm standing aside watching this program unfold and as an evaluator. Then they evaluate people's computer skills. There's a test. It's not a scary test, but there are certain skill competences that are necessary. Mouse pointing all the way through attaching emails and other programs, other things like that. They come up with an individualized internet use plan that's individualized to people. Some people are interested in genealogy, some people are veterans, they may be interested in these type of sites. So the CPMs work with each person in the program to come up with different websites, content areas that they might find interesting. They integrate the use with discussion groups. That essentially, this is an activity-based entire program in the building. There's a very big group effect in the building that I'm discovering. People reinforce interests, get to know each other. They know who the guy is who lives down the hall who is really good at a certain computer thing, and it starts a whole social dynamic in the buildings. I'm not an expert at this, but I've read, because of this program, that high-rise buildings can be very socially isolating, and they're not the best places for people to interact with each other. And if you put a combination of old age, social and economic disadvantage, and low income together, you can have a dynamic where people really just live out their lives in pretty stark isolation. So they provide the cost to offset the subscription of the program. The funding allows wireless in the buildings and free computers. We say free, they belong to the housing authorities that own the buildings, but they're permanently assigned to people who graduate from the program. So there's a reward at the end of it, and then we're able to track their internet use, not their websites, but their number of logons, etc. Anyway, next slide. So here's where the buildings are. 23 buildings, there's about 2,800 residents of the buildings. I've discovered that the turnover of residents is very slow. There's waiting lists in almost all the buildings for apartments, so it's a very nice research situation because I can get in touch with the same folks and ask them questions through time. It's worked out very nice. And there's a couple private sector Section 8 buildings that are right there, listed below. Okay, so after 12 months of project implementation, these are December 31st, January 1st findings that I've just published in a report. We've discovered that all 23 buildings have completed at least 2 rounds of training. The training program is designed to encourage users and then train trainers to make the program self-sustainable, to find people who have a particularly strong aptitude to an affinity for computers and also are popular in the buildings to become trainers themselves. They graduated 2,093 people from at least one round of training. They have recruited 1,143 building residents and 950 people from the outreach program. I don't want to go into this in great detail, but the public housing movement, when it was in high form in the 80s and the 70s, built buildings in neighborhoods with the idea that the building itself would be a catalyst to neighborhood development. So you'll find that low-income people who live in the neighborhoods of the low-income buildings can have an affinity for the building and have a relationship with the people who live in the buildings, and it create a sort of a community effect. So the subsidized refurbished computers have been issued to 1,741 people, or 83.2% of the training graduates. Some didn't qualify for computers, had them, or otherwise we were able to situate them with a free refurbished computer. Okay, there were 207 building residents and 569 outreach participants who became broadband subscribers. They signed up. They had to go through the normal steps to sign up for broadband, but it was free. And at the end of July, when the program ends, we're going to see how well the program, it's my job to watch, not to help, see how well the program transitions people to paid broadband subscriptions. This could be a traditional Comcast bill, or it could be the residents of a building getting together, deciding to toss in a few dollars in the community fee and get the housing authority to subscribe and have free wireless in the buildings. It could take many different forms. 37% improved, their computer skills improved at 6-month follow-up. There was a lot of interest in economically focused web-based applications, and I can get into more specifics in a minute. Contact by program graduates with friends and relatives increased measurably. You'll go ahead, I don't want to take too long here. This graph is hard to stare at, I know, and I can make any of this available. It's very hard from where you're sitting. But there was before and after, and measures here. What you see is there's a great deal more frequent computer and internet use after the program. People become interested, and they incorporate use into their daily lives. Go to the next slide, please. How often do you stay in touch with friends and relatives? You'll see that email has gone way up, telephone down a little bit, mail down a little bit, and face-to-face perhaps down a little bit too. So people are connecting by electronic means more than other traditional forms. This is hard to stare at, and I'm glad to give a copy to anybody who'd like to see it, but these are pre-post measures. These are indicated interests in the computer. How interested are you having an email account, sending and receiving email, on down the list, online gaming, shopping? We want to get a sense of what people are interested in. It's actually, nobody knows. Go in the literature, look at all the foundation reports. Nobody knows what folks who are over 60, who live in socially disadvantaged groups, what kind of internet applications they're interested in. So we now know this, or at least in part. Go ahead. For those of you that have a research background, I used a psychometrically valid instrument called the Loeb scale to measure how social contacts that people had. And again, I know this is hard to look at, and I'm glad to make copies available. What we've discovered is, if you'll go to the next slide, the questions revolve around how many people you regularly interact with, do you trust, would you bring into confidence, how many of those people are friends, relatives, etc. It's a field instrument. It's easy to use and give, and it has psychometric properties that are interesting. And if you're a researcher, the mean score on it went from 15.27 to 19.87, statistically significant, which higher is better on that scale. And it means that people have more frequent and more numerous social contacts that are meaningful to them. And I think, actually, to be honest, there's many measures in our evaluation, but that's probably one of the best. It's the most sustaining. It's when people realize they can use the internet and computers to contact and stay in touch with friends, relatives, people that they care about, in a way that they didn't probably realize they could before the program started. Anyway, that's all the findings. I have a whole report of this is available if you want to go to getseniorsonline.com. I have actually 2 reports, and there'll be a third coming out in July, loaded with all kinds of different things that we measured and discussions of the way the program worked in areas where it was less accessible.
Good morning, everyone. I guess the first question some of you may have to ask is, how does 911 play a part in broadband and the internet? actually gave this presentation in Washington D.C. about a year ago, and when Brian talked or asked me to come up and speak about it, it's kind of hard to put it together. How to explain how 911 and broadband actually share some very common roots, and it's going to play a bigger part as we move forward. So as we get started here, one thing I want to say is 99% of the photos you'll see in here I have taken, and the other thing is under my bio here is I am the former TV weatherman, so I do talk with my hands and I do move around, so I'm sorry. So we'll get started there. We have a whole generation right now that communicates via text messaging. And if you go to the next slide here, you'll notice that you can't text the 911, you know. And we have a generation that is attempting to text to 911. We actually had a case study in Oregon where some younger folks were needing emergency, text 911, but you never got a response back. This message didn't go through. You send an email, you'll finally get that little message back that says failure. But if you send a text message and you never know if it got through, the person answers or not. They actually in Oregon had to put billboards that told people, do not text 911. Now the problem we have is we're now having companies that are making applications, but they're not true 911 applications to get to a specific dispatch center. And like I said, we also have a community of hearing impaired, our deaf community. They have primarily switched to texting each other instead of TDD or sign language. They cannot have full access without going through a relay service to a 911 center. So these are some of the problems we're having to work through. We're also working on technology that was designed in the 1960s. It's 50-year-old technology that we're still trying to put in place and keep things working. We're trying to force all this information down a copper pipe instead of an internet pipe where we can get so much more information. One of those is sending photographs to a dispatch center. You know, picture's worth 1,000 words. When somebody says, well, there was an accident and it looks bad. If the telecommunicator says send me a picture, you now have that picture to say it is, and I need to send extrication, I need to send rescue, I need to send more ambulances. The other thing is sending video to a dispatch center. And where this comes into play is most of the banks, financial institutions, have closed circuit TV. There is ability to bring that into a gateway through broadband. And now you can see inside the bank of a bank robbery in progress. We actually have a combination of banks in Southern Illinois that when we call them and say we've received a bank alarm, they are 60 miles away. That's what they do. They look in before they make a call into the bank and say, yes, there is a bank robbery going on. And then the last thing is taking the information and sharing it with the responders. Now, we have that photograph of the bad accident. We can actually forward that to a hospital. This is our goal down the road, is to be able to send it to the doctor so they can see how much intrusion was in that. How bad were the injuries? So, I mean, there are a lot more people that become players in this. We're Southern Illinois, where I'm from, it is 6 hours south of here. You can still drive 6 hours and still be in the state of Illinois. And we are very rural. And one of those places that we get a lot of times, the hospital calls us and asks us, we heard the dispatch, how bad is it? Okay. We also sit between two rivers. The Coast Guard often tells us that they didn't know there was an incident on either one of the rivers until they see it on the news that night. We can bring those responders through a gateway through our broadband that we are actually working on through a project called CSI. CSI began about 2007. We are Region 7, which is the southern tip of Southern Illinois. Cook County is Region 8, actually. And we actually formed this, it was kind of a joke at first because this is when CSI Miami and New York and all those programs, and it kind of was thrown out there, why don't we call ourselves CSI 911? Therefore, it's counties of Southern Illinois, not criminal investigations. And first off, we just started out with about 5 or 6 counties just wanting to join each other together. Current law says I have to have one backup. Okay? In my dispatch center, and I have one other dispatch, that's 4 people to answer the phone. 5th caller goes unanswered or gets a busy signal. Okay? So as this thing has continued to grow, we have been as high as 18 counties, and we've kind of settled back in to about 15 counties around our area. And where we started, which is a partnership, which is a simple backing each other up, we formed a consortium, and then we actually started working on the concept of feasibility studies to see if the project could actually work. And as we continue to go on through, we found that it actually looks like it will work. What we actually have found that by joining us together in a very rural setting, we only cover less than 500,000 people in our 15 counties. But one of the things is if we make this project work here, it's scalable. It will work in Cook County, Will County, and Collier County. Or if you just want to take it to 2 counties out in Arizona, this is scalable. So we moved forward, and in 2009, we were blessed by the National Emergency Number Association in Washington as a national pilot project for all of North America. Because of we're using their rules, the U.S. Department of Transportation is writing how all this should work for 911. Because you do not want it to fail. It's got to work right the first time. And they're looking at all the technologies involved. Internet, VoIP, Vonage, those type of callers, they actually come straight into this correct dispatch center. We actually partnered with Clearwave Communications for a project, and one of the reasons, I'll back up here a second, that one of the reasons why we looked at our project is the weather conditions that we have down south. We go anywhere from tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, ice events, and we actually had one of the largest tornadoes in 1925, one of the most devastating, killed over 600 people. A month and a half ago, I took an EF4 into the city of Harrisburg. That was quite an event for that morning. My dispatch center answered 2,200 calls in 16 hours. That's 5 people. Okay. Had this project been up and running, there would have been about 65 people out there that answered the phone, and I would have a less stressed workforce. But I'm very pleased with my agency being able to handle 2,200 calls, when a normal day is about 200. So, if you want to continue here, like I said, 2 years ago we took an inland hurricane called a derecho, wiped out the 911 system for 6.5 hours. We actually had to call Verizon and tell them your 911 system's not working, could you please restore it? These are the problems that we're having. Frontier, AT&T, in 2009 told us they had no plans to move to next generation IP networks. Okay, so we're left to. We have done this on our own. And like I said, I discussed, we've had 2 major floods and several ice storms in the last couple of years, which isolates dispatch centers. We actually were taking calls from the state of Kentucky during their ice storm, because that was we were the closest people they could get a hold of. OnStar was calling, reporting accidents to us. How do we get those calls to them? You know, your telephone lines are down, your radio line services are down. It becomes quite a panic once they dump a call onto you. So with the fiber optic network that Clearwave Communications is building for us, we're going to use as part of that broadband technology. Like I said, we have met several times in Washington and Springfield, and just came back from Washington, D.C., and we're starting to get more and more people out there that are getting interested in next generation. Homeland Security, U.S. Department of Agriculture, because it's rural. How do we get these people able to call an emergency service center? And here we are today. Now, I know it was kind of like a hole. There are 11 counties in the state of Illinois that do not have 911. Do not have 911. 3 of them surround my county. And I actually provide, in the next slide there, cellular 911 service to those counties. At least somebody can call from a cell phone. It's very limited down there because there are 1 or 2 towers for a whole county, not for a city, a whole county. So, you know, even cell phone technology. As we continue to grow, like I said, we partnered with Clearwave Communications, who is putting in 700 miles of fiber optic cable connected to the internet hotels in both St. Louis and Chicago. And they have came up with a plan to connect all of our dispatch centers at basically no cost to us. If we had tried to do this with T1 technology, it was $500 a month for 1 T1, and we needed a minimum of 4. My phone bill right now for 911 service is $5,000 a month. Okay. I have some systems that can't afford that and are looking to turn it over. Fiber optic is half, and I only need 1 piece of strand of fiber for all of them. So it is a beneficial thing. Phone companies are now coming out against us because we're taking funds away from them from a funding neutral source. So those are some of the issues that are being played out at the Illinois Commerce Commission today. You know, and our Commerce Commission is not they're not up with the technology either. And they keep asking us such things as, once you let somebody else do it, we just copy what they do. This is your own state of Illinois. This is not a Southern Illinois project. This is statewide because once our network is done, they're doing one in DeKalb, they're doing one in Rock Island. You will end up connecting these all together, and we will eventually have a statewide network for 911 services. So if for some reason, if we take a call from the city of Chicago, we can reroute it to the same network and that person goes right back to them. Or they have a disaster, I can take their calls. People don't care. They just have somebody that answers the phone when they have an emergency. And since this winter, Clearwave began installing the fiber in my location, hopefully by the time I get back from this event, they will have lit my facility, and that's how close we're getting to this. There are 2 hubs between Murfreesboro and Harrisburg that will be the backbone. That we are double redundant, which is one more reason we do it ourselves. The phone company has one redundancy, as we lost it in 2008. And like I said, part of the Clearwave, we first wanted to do our own BTOP grant. We found we were not going to score more than about 10 points. We partnered with Clearwave Communications and was able to get them more points, and they received a $45 million federal grant for not only us, but for the schools, libraries. You know, it's a partnership for Southern Illinois that has big things. These are just some of the people involved. Just with our project, we enlisted the help of the Illinois Institute of Technology, who's done a lot of the design, the cut over. They've thrown 1 million calls at the system in one day just to see if it would fail, and they've yet to make the system fail. A company called Assure 911 here in Wheaton has done a wonderful job of writing how that's going to be, because if I had to write it and say, we're going to connect this wire between that county and this county, we're done. But they have done all the statistical work for us. Acme Packet, session border controls, and then, like I said, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, they've actually been a financial sponsor in this because they believe that it benefits everyone. Like I said, this is just where we're starting today. Like I said, it is a wonderful project. I could spend hours talking to you about it, but that's just kind of why we're working on it. I have a daughter that the Verizon wireless guy called me one day and said, I think there's a problem with the phone. She had 15,000 text messages in 30 days. I said, no, that's about right. And that's the generation that we have to go back to is we're not going back because people are turning their landlines off. We've got to look forward in how to move forward. And this is one of the reasons I will say this for last is why not wait? Well, this is the reason right here. Men rode horseback from Fort Dearborn. It was kind of funny. We're in the Fort Dearborn room. To Shawneetown. Shawneetown was Chicago in the 1800s. It was the city on the river. It was the megapolis. You know, it was the center of economic opportunity. And they rode horseback and asked for a $1,000 loan, and they were refused because they said they were too far from Shawneetown to ever amount to anything. And as you may see, it is the opportunity was missed in that little city is the city of Chicago. And on the South Bank down the street here actually holds those records of that refusal letter. So this is why you don't wait. It's an opportunity, and I think we need to move forward for the benefit of the entire state.
I'm going to be very quick. I'm going to give you a global view of applications of broadband and then bring it to a local concept that we saw in our first session. Broadband and the use of internet I studied was basically how technology can be applied to elderly. I looked and studied and found out research in this area and came to a result of a journal that was just issued on this topic. And a lot of things in it applied to what's going on here. Best example is in the Zambia, Maki, where, and in Australia, where exactly what my friend talked about 2 minutes ago, that's what they're doing. Going through exactly the same problems. It's uncanny. So then, and Jim's study was in the journal too. That was narrowed, and that was about technology and elderly. Then, after looking at this material for a while, I suddenly saw the concept, what do you do with the broadband? And because I'm a former ed psych professor, I saw that it had to do with learning. And as I keep learning all this new technology, and somebody described learning this new technology and what it's like, well, I'm older, and I've been putting it all together. An opportunity came for me to study and write about new learning, lifelong learning. And so I shifted my focus on how do you use the broadband for lifelong learning. Then the person in there, for our first session, started talking from the point of view of library science about knowledge and information and what's going on, and that, by some coincidence, is exactly what I'm looking at. What's happened now, and what I think you recognize, is that we now have had such an expansion of technology that learning comes on different levels and is integrated in different ways. And I've collected and researched all these different ways things are coming together. Now we seem to have a spot of learning here, some other activity here, some other activity here, and some other activity here, all wonderful, but we really don't have a model to kind of put all that stuff together. So I'm trying to write a chapter and do a couple of things with that and get other people to participate, which I already did this morning, on how we can have a global look at learning. I'm so excited about what my friend Dionne said, because she's illustrating a lot of what's going on. She's got, I hope that if I use her systems, that would make me smart. But can you help me? The truth is, by the way, my notes and everything will be, they put them online, so you'll be getting notes and stuff, and I'm not using overviews because I want to be fast. And, or you can leave your name if you want further discussion. Think about knowledge, and think about learning. I've been collecting all the ways that people could learn. The simple way in lifelong learning is I went to Roosevelt University where I taught, or do some teaching, and they have lifelong continuing education program where people pay, elderly pay $150 a year, and they go to some studies and some programs. Or you can just go to community college and take some studies. And see, that's our traditional focus. What's happened now is this has been turned upside down. So that now, one of the concepts that I'm developing is the individually directed learning, the individually directed applications. So that if you look at Web 2, when you use your computer today, and for me, I'm a little older, it's so frustrating because it does things for you. It puts in answers or writes a word you never wanted to write it that way. You gotta undo it. It gets rid of your program and puts another line in. If I want to write to my friend Jim Ciesla and put his name in, it says, "Don't you mean Bonnie Boner?" or something like that. And so, if you put in a word, sometimes you put in a word, it moves it, indents it, and puts in a number 1. And so it's doing all the stuff for you. If you want to get something, you just pass over something and it gives you the desktop. And so then you can put in, you've got a line here that if you want instant move, it pops up. But even if I don't want instant news, it pops up. Then you get all these advertisements you don't want. And I don't want players, and I don't want luxurious bras and stuff. But you get these. So we used to have the old web. Does anybody remember the old web? You stare at it. If you want something, you move your mouse and you do it. Plain and simple, right? But no, now we have individual selected and individual annoying computers. Some people love that. Kids, if you ever see kids, I've seen kids 5 years old with kids' iPhones. Where do kids learn how to read nowadays? They don't, not in school, they learn on iPhones. So my point is we have now information that's individually selected. And what this amounts to is open source material that's free to you, college courses. Just 2 days ago, 5 universities said they're putting online a bunch of free courses. We have sources, so now we have a new open university. It'll be ready in a year. I'm on a committee started by a guy, Wayne McIntosh, from New Zealand. We have wikis that are programs that anybody can add to, like Wikipedia. We have programs. I'm on a news program called Bespoken, which is a new website where people are invited to put in their own stories. So that if you want to learn, you could go to all these sources. I'm writing them down so you could have them. You could have new lectures, Ken's or whatever, a series of lectures. You've got the Khan Academy. You've got presentation places like we see, which is a program where you present your own classes. And there's other places that you can present your own classes. So I'm bringing that in to add to the librarian how information is individualized for everybody, and to add to Jim's use of the web, of broadband. So I just wanted to fill in the blanks, and I hope I did okay.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Matt Parks. I'm Director of Network Services at Northern Illinois University. And I'll talk to you a little bit this morning about the broadband projects we're involved in throughout the Northern Illinois community. As a point of reference, as I look at the eChicago booklet here, we see, Chicago and the surrounding community. Most of the work we're doing is out in this region, out to the west, northern and northwest part of Illinois. That said, we love Chicago. It is the region's aggregation point for cheap bandwidth, and on behalf of NIU, we need Chicago at our campus community in DeKalb. So where it all started for NIU in broadband. Just need a couple here, so. Something called NIUnet. About 10 years ago, NIU, based in DeKalb, we've got several education centers throughout Northern Illinois, one in Naperville, one in Hoffman Estates, one in Rockford, and we were paying commercial charges for transport on those networks, which, as we all know, can be very expensive. And so, as ITS, was kind of footing that bill, looking for opportunities to still deliver bandwidth to the education centers, but do it in a more cost-effective fashion, they decided to enter into the fiber space, something called carrier Ethernet, to help deliver this higher bandwidth speeds to the education centers, but also to cut the costs in order to do that. So that kind of initiated for NIU the entry point into broadband, okay? And as we built our technical expertise and leadership with this initial deployment. As a university, you think about how can I also deploy these kind of services? How can I benefit the larger community? And so there's a number of networks here that NIU has been involved with for the last about 10 years that I'll talk to briefly here. Illinois Municipal Broadband Communications Association, or as we like to call it, IMBCA, is a consortia of municipal networks that are all bonded together with fiber optics along the Illinois Tollway. We've got something called the Northern Illinois Technology Triangle, which is essentially an overlay of NIUNet, where NIUNet serves the university and public institutions. The NIT is for private consumption, for regional providers who want access to cheaper bandwidth in Chicago. One of the biggest challenges in Northern Illinois outside of Chicago is access to cheap bandwidth. The local and regional carriers and providers pay a significant cost per megabit, right? And they had to transfer that on to their customers, the homeowners, the businesses, et cetera. So the NIT is something that was developed, again, as similar to the NIUNet, but to serve the private sector. Then there was something called TriLightNet. This is healthcare, right? So between Swedish American Hospital in Rockford and Freeport Health Network in Freeport, Illinois, they got together, developed a network called TriLightNet to serve what they're doing, their purposes of healthcare, but also to serve a lot of the clinics in the Northern Illinois community. NIU played a part, kind of technologically speaking, in helping to get that up. Another similar to IMBCA is an NMBA, closer into the suburbs. Again, similar approach here as IMBCA, municipal, working with schools, et cetera, to utilize broadband bandwidth and what they're trying to accomplish. So all of this kind of was going on, and then this ERA funding came up, right, in 2009. And this is where the data network comes in. NIU, in partnership with DeKalb County, and I'll get into more details here shortly, and some private industry got together and said, we want to deploy broadband technology to DeKalb County. There are a lot of areas in DeKalb County that are unserved or underserved. We want to use that stimulus grant money to help deliver 21st century communication capabilities at a similar cost of a T1. So if you know anything about a T1, you're talking about a meg and a half of bandwidth. We're talking about gigabit speeds here on fiber. And so our cost curve here is completely different and much more enabling in terms of how we can use it. And then the big one, iFiber. So this was where data was around 1 grant, iFiber was around 2 grant with the NTIA. Much larger, as you can see, similar approach as the data network, right? We're kind of cutting our teeth with the data network so we can do it effectively with the iFiber network, serving what is, especially up in the northwest corner, a very underserved area for fiber optics and bandwidth availability. So that's all going on in Northern Illinois, but we also know that Illinois is a much larger state, and there's a network called the Illinois Century Network, which serves schools and libraries throughout the state. We want to be able to connect up all the schools and libraries and so forth in Northern Illinois, but make sure they can get to ICN. So we're connecting in with ICN to provide that enhance that statewide network that ICN provides. And last but not least, there's something called the IRHN, or Illinois Rural Health Network, which is just that. It's a grant funded from the FCC to deploy 21st century broadband technology to rural hospitals that just don't have access to that kind of bandwidth at a reasonable cost. So this is a project that's been going on for a number of years that we're engaged with. The hospitals and clinics that we're serving through iFiber and the data network will interconnect into to also connect with the IRHN network. So peer-to-peer, hospital, clinic to clinic, for the purposes of electronic health records, high bandwidth, data needs, et cetera, for imaging and so forth, will all be part of that larger cloud. Okay. So a little bit more on the DeKalb Advancement of Technology Authority data. Okay. DeKalb County is the grant recipient. This was received in about the first quarter of 2010. It was awarded in the first quarter of 2010. It is a partnership between the DeKalb County government, between Northern Illinois University and a private company called DeKalb Fiber Optic for the purposes of serving what are called community anchor institutions, right? Schools, libraries, hospitals and clinics, 911 centers, municipalities, county entities, etc. To, again, provide a cloud-style network for collaboration purposes, so like institutions can collaborate with each other for the purposes of improved use of technology. The grant was for close to $15 million, includes about 130 miles of fiber throughout the county, and will connect somewhere north of 60 community anchor institutions in the county. IBOT Northwest, also known as I-Fiber, this was awarded in third quarter of 2010. Around the first quarter of 11, the recipient, NIU, and the subrecipients, LaSalle County, Rockford, and Blackhawk Hills, RC&D, came together and said we need to form a not-for-profit to be able to effectively deploy a network of this scale. And so I-Fiber was formed as a result of that, right? It's an Illinois not-for-profit that will own and operate this transport network. The grant itself is for close to $70 million. We'll have almost 900 miles of total network in that region deployed to serve the community anchor institutions. The 9 counties, Joe Davie, Stevenson, Winnebago, Boone, you can see them there, and LaSalle County is the one just south of DeKalb County that is also served by this. Over 500 community anchor institutions, right? It's a lot. While the construction side of this network is a real heavy lift to get the network built and in the ground and deployed and lit, we have an equally difficult effort in the outreach to the anchor institution community to describe and promote the value of the network to connect on, right? This grant for the I-Fiber network and for the data network is, it's a capital fund, right? You've got the money to now go build the network, not to sustain it, not to operate, right? So this is where community anchors come in. There's a service charge associated with an anchor connecting onto the network. Again, it's tiered depending on the type of entity, but it's essentially T1-like cost for access, but for much larger bandwidth speeds that are available. But we are making significant progress on the community anchor institutions. I'll talk generally about that here in another slide. So that's what the overall map looks like. I think it's I-Fiber is blue, and the data network there in DeKalb County will interconnect with the I-Fiber network. So virtually, it'll be one large network, right? So a lot of this from the public sector, from the community anchor institutions, is about cost avoidance, right? They don't have access, most of them don't have access to what I'll call 21st century speeds, megabit, or high megabit or gigabit type speeds. That's a core tenet of what we're trying to do here, is to get the bandwidth limitations out of the way. Open, let them collaborate, and really expand the capabilities in applications, right? Because it's all about applications for these networks. Consolidation. So if I have a virtual network that all schools are able to collaborate with at gig level speeds, we can work to collaboratively within that network footprint to consolidate equipment. I might not need as many email servers or data repositories. A lot of stuff you hear the talk of the cloud. We can go to the cloud with stuff. We don't need the hardware resident local to that school because they need it there today because they don't have bandwidth to get outside. Now we're breaking that barrier down. Efficiency. So we've got a couple examples here, District 428 and 427, where they get together. They're doing what they do today because they're limited with their bandwidth capabilities. They're getting together today in the expectation of connecting to the I-Fiber and data networks to save significant costs on voice, to convert to a voice over IP type solution where you're able to consolidate your costs significantly. You're not reducing your lines to the institution, but you're able to do it in a much more cost-effective way. But also just server equipment. There's lots of different local applications that schools use today that are useful, but again, they're limited to a given school because of the bandwidth. We've removed that hurdle. Now these schools can collaborate, work together at, you've got an expert in one school district that can do something for a larger area and you can really breed expertise in certain areas. And just innovation, ability to provide enhanced courses, right? So, and I use in the business of educating the community of Northern Illinois. You know, there's a real value here at distance education. So we hope to promote all of this. But let's not forget about the private sector, right? It's important for the anchor institutions to do what it is I described there, but also in the private sector, we want to expand economic development, okay? That comes in many forms. The data project I described is a partnership with private industry, okay? The iFiber network itself, we're doing what we call providing a transport network to the general public. Simple as that, a transport network. We're partnering with local, regional, and national providers to connect up and deliver services to all of those anchor institutions. If you've got a local provider, ISP in LaSalle County, they're limited to LaSalle County for the reasons of transport access. We hope to break down those barriers so that LaSalle County provider can now reach up to Joe Davies with their business plan. So really breaking down barriers in the private sector as well to help promote economic development, help land companies in Northern Illinois that otherwise wouldn't be coming because of a lack of transport. A lot of small communities have talked to us about the importance of this, that if they were landing a company was looking to do business, they would not look in these areas if it weren't for fiber optics. This is table stakes now when companies decide where to go. Quickly on the project, this is data is a little bit further ahead, so they're close to 100 miles in the ground. Some of the initial anchor institutions are coming online, and that project is going quite well. On the iFiber side, as I said, we got the grant in third quarter. We selected our engineering firm in first quarter of 11 and incorporated as iFiber at that time. We received the federal government's FONSI, which is the finding of no significant impact, which is essentially a big green light that says, go build, right? In the second quarter, construction started in the third quarter last year, and we've got a little bit of wireless that we're gonna do as part of this network as well that we just signed a contract in first quarter to begin. Last but not least, MAC. So this is the overall topology you kind of saw a few minutes ago. The purple is the good story here. That's almost, or just north of half of the iFiber network that is in the ground right now. So we've made a lot of progress thanks partly to a warm winter. We've got a lot of work left to do, but we're very excited to complete this network over the next 12 to 18 months. Thanks.
And if you could come up to the microphone if you have a question, that would be great for all of our recording purposes.
I had a question for Dionne. At one point in your talk, you mentioned something, I don't remember if it was per quarter or per month, but 41 new contributors per unit of time.
Correct. For our community portal, that's per quarter. So we capture them quarterly.
What I was wondering is, have you looked at how, on average per quarter, how many contributors you lose? So if you gain 41 and lose 3, so like a net.
Unfortunately, we don't capture, we don't record how many we lose. We capture all of the contributors from the very first time they signed up on the portal, but we're not capturing if they're constantly posting on the portal. Thank you.
Hi, I'm from the view of I, more specifically sites, which stands for something long and complicated, but it basically boils down to the network people. And we're partially doing a campus network upgrade and partially doing, I don't know if you've heard of Urbana-Champaign big broadband project, but I was really particularly interested in, I'd never heard that about students texting 911 before, and that's some information I'm definitely going to have to take back to our people, because we are looking right now at, how do we use the link, which is not phone-based at all, to get people to connect it to 911? What do we do if they're on wireless and stuff? And the texting angle that completely not occurred to us that I know of. So I'm really glad I came and going to have information to take back to people. Would it be okay if I asked if Abigail would talk to you about what EU911 needs for, you know, people coming from Lincoln, a non-phone based system?
Well, I guess the first thing is we've got to convince the Illinois Commerce Commission that this is something worthwhile in our state.
Yeah.
Like I said, our plan alone was over 1,000 pages. This is how technically challenged our local, our state government is. It took them a week to figure out how to accept that electronically. Okay? I hate to say bad things about our state, but I mean that's at our government level. So, you know, they keep telling them that people are trying to text message, and we have people dying out there because they can't. You know, once again, the deaf community would love to text to us. You know, they can even go to the point where they sign language via video phone. You can't do that either. You know, I don't want those everybody come and beat me up because it's not acceptable, but we have to get past the technology hurdle and allow this to happen at the state level to approve the project or a pilot project. We've got 1 year to show that this will work. There's special legislation that our legislators passed 2 years ago to allow this pilot project to happen. But they're still stuck in these 1965 rules of how 911 operates, and they keep wanting to force us down those paths, and we keep trying to ask them. They actually defeated 2 bills. The ICC went to the heads of the legislature this spring and defeated 2 bills that would have changed the rules and the funding opportunity. There's the other big kick. You know, people are turning off their home landlines, okay? They're going to cell phones. You know, there's a difference in who pays what. You know, whether it's 50 cents for a cell phone, or my county it's $1.50 for a landline. So it takes 3 cell phones. Well, you don't carry 3 cell phones. You know, so, you know, those things are financial issues that we're going to start turning off services. You know, because we can't afford to operate the network that's out there today, but going to a new network, which is fiber-based, less tariffs, bigger bandwidth, it's actually cheaper and saves us money in the long run. We did a study last year and presented to the General Assembly that shows 911's underfunded, and we need to move to these new projects. That there needs to be a state 911 board, Commerce Commission, who requested a study, won't move anything forward. So we've got some headblocks that we've got to iron out, number one. And it is a state issue. It's not Southern Illinois, it's not Champaign, it's not DeKalb. It is the state of Illinois.
Hi, my name is Charles Benton. I chair the Partnership for Connected Illinois. And Tracy, your case study is inspiring. It really is. Let's talk afterwards and let's see how we can help you. Because this 911 opportunity, the model that you built needs to break through the bureaucracy. Okay. I think the overarching general point I'd like to make and question, especially Dionne and Jim, is when the federal and state funding runs out, what do you do next? Because the models you're trying to build are trying to prove the case. You know, it's the key question is, what difference does this investment make? How are we going to build a better world as a result of what we're doing? And research is the way to document what difference this funding makes. And to have a more coordinated research effort statewide is obviously what I think eChicago is all about, and really should focus on next year. So I'm getting ahead of myself because I got to make this comment tomorrow afternoon. Anyway, so the question, and especially Dionne, I'd like to focus on you specifically, because the Julia Stash's big idea with the famous City of the Networks report 5 years ago was to build 3 models and then see how those models would work and then take those models to scale in Chicago. Now, the influx of the federal funds increased that from 3 to 5, project, so you have a larger base, but what are you going to do next? How is this model going to be taken to scale? What is the strategy on this? What is LISC thinking about? LISC this is 5 centers within 16. What is LISC thinking about in terms of taking it from the 5 to the 16 communities, let alone the rest of Chicago? So what is the plan? What is the strategic plan and thinking about taking the success, about if you are successful, how do you take that success to scale and move to the next level?
Well, it depends on who's asking the question. If you say if Smart Communities was successful, because the purpose of the program is broadband adoption, getting 11,000 individuals to adopt broadband. However, we're far off of that goal. But our training numbers are what we would say is success. The changing the mindsets of community residents in low to moderate income communities that are digitally illiterate, we find that as being successful. So strategically, LISC internally is thinking about integrating technology into all of our new community programming. So we have 5. Look, this was a demonstration. So we were going in, piloting, finding out what would our community residents want? What would our not-for-profits want? So 18 months later today, they're saying this cannot go away. It has changed the mindsets of individuals that look at technology different now, that they incorporate technology in their everyday part of their lives. So our Family Net Centers is something definitely that we plan to scale up to all of our centers for working families if we can. We're a recipient of the Social Innovation Fund as well. So we're trying to incorporate funding there to support the Family Net Centers. The community portals is definitely another very successful story out of the Smart Communities. We are working with other funders to try to support this program afterward. The community portals itself can be a self-sustaining model where they would have ads on the community portals, where the ads would pay for the portals, where they have businesses that are contributing and becoming members of the community portals. A few of our other programmings, we're not sure what Smart Communities will look like in 2013, what iteration Smart Communities will be, but we are continuing to work with our partners at the city, at the Smart Collaborative, and other foundations to find out if there are other individuals that are willing to support this program.
Yes, good morning. My name is Greg Gates. I'm a social worker working with youth that are exiting detention correctional systems, as well as youth that are in street gangs. And I'm looking at in the program that, and actually I'm addressing this question to you, Dionne. I'm looking at the communities that you're working with in terms of youth, and wondering where Woodlawn figures within that equation. And because we've got a number of youth that are coming out of these institutions that are in gangs, and they go online to look at other gang organizations across the country. So how can we improve that?
Well, to answer your question, I mean, there is curriculum that we utilized when we worked with youth over the summer. So I'll start there. Common Sense Media, it's free curriculum where we're teaching youth how to be better online citizens. Cyberbullying, as we know, social media is the place where sometimes the gang members are saying, hey, this is where we're meeting, or this is what's going to happen. So we do try to implement the curriculum from Common Sense Media to inform you, your digital presence online, and something that will follow you, because you won't always be a gang member, let's hope. And in addition to that, to find out what are the consequences behind this. In Woodlawn, we are working with Woodlawn on their Choice Neighborhood Awards. So there is a technology component included in that. And I am working closely with Woodlawn and their technology committee to help bring some of the programs that we've created in Smart Communities. Actually, Woodlawn is a part of our 63rd Street Center for Working Families. So we have residents that are able to come access services there. And we do work at Teamwork Inglewood, being the lead agency at Inglewood, does reach out
I had a couple questions. One for Matt and Tracy about spreading broadband. I know, especially in southern Illinois and a lot of rural areas where the topography of the land makes it very difficult to spread land. How are you going to make that happen even with the fiber? I mean, it's still going to be big costs, so maybe just a few sentences on that. And also, Jim, and I'll sit down, I'm interested in the method of you gathering research in the neighborhood, in the housing centers. Are you going in door to door, or is it all surveys, et cetera, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So, I think I mentioned in the presentation briefly, the federal grants essentially provide the capital funding for the installation of the duct and cable system throughout, in the case of data, DeKalb County for I-Fiber through the 9-county region. So the heavy lifting with regards to the real cost, the market wouldn't bear by itself, right, is being funded out of the stimulus era funding, right? So all of that is covered, and this was an iterative process to, develop your best case network topology through these 10 counties, and then you had to scale it back based upon budget availability to where it sits today, right? So as I mentioned, data is most of the way through the grant funding from the standpoint of construction. I-Fiber is probably about halfway through that, and then the important thing, grant gets you the network, right? You've got to maintain sustainability. That is absolutely critical, right? So that's where the anchor institutions come in, and that's where the private sector comes in to leverage this network for the purposes of broadband.
In the southern part, Clear Wave Communications is 22 counties, and they want to put everything underground. And they proposed that to the NTI folks who rejected it initially and said, well, some of this could be done cheaper if you put it on poles and put it up in the air. I actually, CSI and him at Clearway worked together, resubmitted justification because of the ice storms, the tornadoes. It's safer underground, and after we proved that point to them, they accepted it. Now, the problem is we have quite a bit of rock, and those are the later portion of the project is they've plowed in where it's been easy digging, but the last quarter of it is going to be in the hard rock. But they have ideas and everything. They have, I think it's 6 companies working, going in different directions, as far as away from Louisiana, that are help boring. All this is all directional boring. It's all being plowed in. So that part of it is wonderful. In the meantime, they've been going back in and having BSAs, business service agreements, to the anchor institutions, to our institutions, and anyone else that would like to ride on that network. So they're having to find, like I said, the funding stream to continue in the future.
Right, address your question. Connected Living's job is to go out into the communities surrounding the 23 buildings to recruit people to the computer lab that's been established in each of the buildings. We collect data from them when they come to the lab. I have names and addresses for the people who consent, and we could geocode those, and that's the work we've not done yet, but it'd be very interesting to look at a cloud of points around the building to see how the outreach would work, and that's something that's definitely possible to do. In the short run, we're mostly focusing on the effects of the actual computer training, and at some point we'll look at the effects of the recruitment to training too, which is sort of a bigger project.
If I could touch on just a little bit on Greg's question, you said smart communities. Let me tell you something we're working on. It's called smart homes and smart people. Smart homes, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but this technology is changing every day. A smart home, instead of the fire alarm going off or the smoke detector going off, it automatically will call 911. The house will call 911. You may not be home to report that fire. Okay? On the smart people side, they were putting medical devices in people today that it senses you're having a heart attack and it calls 911. This is the future that we're headed, is how do you accept that information at a dispatch center? So right now, a lot of that gets thrown to a call center somewhere in Canada and forwarded to us, and there's a delay. These are some of the things that we're working on too. It's smart communities, smart homes, smart people.
There are
aren't any more questions, it's now lunchtime, so we'll see you back here at 12:45, and let's give our panelists one more round.